get your recruiting shoes on at this level?
Yeah, it's different, of course. Everyone's going after the same player. Previous stops I've been, you've recruited more, maybe quantity than you do here. You narrow it down quickly. But excited about where we're at right now with the recruiting process. But of course, it's pretty fluid, and so we got to stay on top of it and stay up to speed and continue to create relationships with these young men.
What's been the biggest challenge for recruiting, going up a level?
Well, I think just understanding kind of what the landscape is right now. It's ever changing. I think there's always a challenge when you're trying to recruit kids from a national thought process. Kids are 2,000 miles away. There's a lot of space between us and them, and you just don't have the access that maybe a university that might be just a little bit closer. So you got to really get your claws into them. You got to continue to, like I said, make relationships not only with them, with their inner circle, but also mom and dad as well.
What have you learned about recruiting the Southern California region?
There's a lot of good players out here. We need to make sure that we recruit the state of California, but also I like to call it the state of LA. The 5 counties that make up, the metropolitan area. We need to make sure that we know who the best players are, but we also need to identify who's the right fit for USC and what we're looking to do both offensively and defensively.
What is that right fit? What type of linebacker are you looking for?
Well, I think it depends on what specific position you're looking for. I think, if it's a Sam linebacker, probably looking for someone, maybe an oversized safety, maybe a guy that's going to have some growth potential that can move down a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, but still have some coverage skills, some short area quickness that can lend itself. So you don't have to necessarily sub out when you want to play man coverage. Your Mike linebacker, the first thing I think of is a great leader, someone that's a great communicator. They're the extension of the defense out on the field. And then our will linebacker, to me, is probably one of our more dynamic positions on our defense. It requires someone that has a huge skill set. They got to play in space, play in the box, and that can play up on the line of scrimmage, play back off the ball. And so it requires someone who has, hopefully at the high school level, they have a little bit of that experience, but also someone who has great football IQ, someone who can transition, because it does take time. That's the one spot that probably demands the most learning, or is I hate to say most difficult, but takes the most seasoning to play at that spot.
Matt, we saw Houston in the spring game.
Yep.
Obviously, two kind of natural legs in terms of where they played, last year. What do you see as kind of the potential to fit of that combination?
Well, I've been excited about the fit. I think adding Easton to our roster elevated Mason's football. Certain people are predisposed to being great communicators, and I know last year Mason had a lot on his plate, checks, adjustments, ATFs, whatever you want to call them. Now he has someone else that those can go through in Easton. And so by taking some things off his plate or out of his hands, we've created clarity, allowed him to get his cleats in the ground and play fast, and that's what we need. We need him to play fast because he can make big-time plays. We saw that he's made some huge plays for us in spring. We need now that trajectory to continue to climb and give him the tools and the clarity to play fast and free on Saturdays.
Matt, this defense's confidence was kind of depleted by the end
Yep.
of last season. When you step in as a new coaching staff, what's kind of the first step in rebuilding that?
Well, I think the approach to teaching, diving into the fundamentals, diving into the skills that are required. You want to give your players a foundation, a baseline where they know when they go into game that they are fully prepared. And I know it sounds, real simple, but it is. I mean, give them, all the tools that they need to be successful from a fundamental and technique standpoint. That way, then, when there are those moments of adversity that hit, and they're always going to hit, your players have that. They have a knowledge base and a skill set that will allow them to get through those moments.
In what ways do you sense that confidence already?
Well, I think just the amount of time that Coach Lynn has allowed us to have for individual fundamental skills work in practice. So you see guys grasping things, you see eyes opening, you see light bulbs coming on a daily basis. the emphasis that we used during the month of June with some of our access time to continue learning, but also hopefully promoting retention, all the things that we put installed in the spring. And then, the month of July was Coach Wiley and his staff getting them ready and making sure that they were prepared for, the season that's coming up.
When you evaluate that front seven, how much was it clear that you guys needed to add size, strength before going into the Big Ten?
Well, I think that was immediate. The minute all of our feet got in LA, that was an emphasis. We sat down right with Coach Wiley. Even during bowl prep, had some opportunities to visit with him. And what does a defense need to look like going into the 2024 season, going into the Big Ten, going into a very competitive, challenging schedule. And we needed to make sure that we were bigger, but it also needs to be functional at the same time. I mean, bigger is just big. We need to be able to run. We need to be able to play off blocks. We need to be able to execute all those fundamentals and techniques, throughout the defense.
With the new staff, the new players, and the timeline that you guys have, what's realistic in terms of this season, and what kind of identity you guys?
Well, that's the $1 million question. You could sit here and say, we're going to be better, but what's better mean? Better compared in the Big Ten. You really don't have anything, analytically to compare yourself to. We need to take every game 1-0, or take every week and make an emphasis to go 1-0. I think we need to avoid looking down long term, down the schedule, and game one needs to be our emphasis. When we get to game week, when we get into fall camp, it needs to be just daily improvement. That's from a retention standpoint, from an execution standpoint, and also from an effort standpoint. We need to have, unbelievably great effort, out on the football field. I know we've had a tremendous summer with Coach Wiley. We've set ourselves up for a good spot, but it's still going to be that just building upon day after day. And, if we can put a sequence of good days together, I think that's when culture starts to develop.
How would you describe the identity that the defense is trying to get to?
Well, I think I think we know what we want it to look like, but what you want and what it actually going to be are two different things. We want to have a physical presence. We want to talk about being, one of the most physical, or if not the most physical team in the country. We want to be good at the fundamentals of, the game. It's a game of blocking and tackling. Can you get off blocks? Can you tackle? Can you execute blocks and sustain tackles and break tackles? And so, not to oversimplify the game, but sometimes, as coaches, it's easy to do that. We need to be fundamentally better than our opponents, and that's where we're at right now. We got to continue to, every day go out there with that mentality.
Dan was talking about just flexibility and being adaptable and scheme. I'm sure every defensive coordinator says that about how they run a defense, but how have you seen it actually apply?
Well, that is extremely accurate in what he says. Coach Lynn does an outstanding job of compartmentalizing what we're doing from a teaching standpoint. I believe in this as something that I've had previously. If we can teach the game in terms of concepts and rules and principles, then you should be able to have some volume to the defense. If you have to go out there and your players are memorizing what's going on, you're going to struggle a little bit. And so he has really emphasized, I know, and that's kind of my upbringing in the sport was always, learning conceptually how to play defense, learning the rules and principles of coverages, run fits, so that way, again, when adversity hits, your players have the necessary information to get through those moments.
Is there a coach in your past that kind of taught you that?
Well, I think, just I'm probably fortunate when I was at GA, and then just, as, sometimes, you're the sum of the people that you surround yourself with. I know Bob Nielsen, the coach that I played for, was very much that way. It was all, teach the basics and build off of those and give your kids tools and the confidence to go into every game.
Hey, Coach, when you look at the experience of this coaching staff, just one, how fun is it to collaborate all together? And two, being a national champion head coach, have you been able to kind of talk to Coach Riley and been like, hey, let's try this or whatnot, just the collaboration?
Let's talk with the defensive staff. It's been great. I will say that when you have a room full of very capable, intelligent, smart, creative minds, the one thing you're always worried about is will there be too much information? Will we over prepare? Paralysis by analysis. And that hasn't been the case at all. Very humble room. We're all here to get better. We're all here to continue to help these young men be the best versions of themselves. And so that's exciting. Now we haven't had any adversity in the room yet. We haven't played a game. We haven't lost yet or anything like that. But, up to this point, I really like where we're at. And then, having been a head football coach, Coach Riley has allowed me to get involved a little bit with some scheduling, with some, maybe other thoughts. Hey, have you ever thought of doing something just slightly different? We've done it this way. Or maybe there's things that, I did it this way and you don't want to do it that way. I've learned by doing. And so it's been great. He's allowed me to maybe sporadically put that head coach's hat on and think as a head coach. But for the most part, I've enjoyed just kind of being the head coach of the linebackers so far.
Tyler Robles says you actually came in with a bunch of special teams ideas and some thoughts in that area. It's kind of been an area that USC could kind of improve on.
Sure.
What's the emphasis on special teams in training camp?
Well, we want to be really sound in what we're doing fundamentally and schematically. The game of football, when you can be complementary in all three phases, that's when you have your best chance of winning. And so I'm a firm believer in that. That's something that we hung our hat on at previous stops that I've been at. And so I'm just trying to help this team be the best versions of themselves. And if there's things that I think maybe we can do better, or are there other ideas or other ways, I'm going to be willing to share those, because I want to be successful, and for us to do that, we need to make sure we put the best product out there, but also one that our players can execute and give them the tools and the knowledge to be successful.